I'm GT3 driver and sim racer James Baldwin, and I'm going to talk you through about force feedback. What is it and how can you use it to make yourself drive faster? Before I get started though, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss anything. Everything in this video I'll talk about applies to force feedback in general, but I've been lucky enough over the past few days to try out the new Logitech G923. This new wheel is the first to use a technology they're calling Trueforce. So in a nutshell, this means that rather being pre-programmed or scripted from a library of pre-fabricated haptic effects, the forces you'll be feeling are based on information taken directly from the physics and audio engines of the game. A new chip in the G923 can then process this data and calculate forces it sends into your hands up to 4,000 times per second. So right now it's working with Assetto Corsa Competizione, iRacing and a few other game titles, but apparently it's very easy for game devs to implement it into their game. So to be honest, I'd expect to see it pretty much everywhere in the future. So quickly, let's have a look and see what is force feedback. Sim racing is one of the most immersive virtual hobbies you can do, allowing us to plug our wheel and pedals into a PC or console and drive virtual cars when we please. However, what sim racing can't replicate is the G-forces you'd feel through your seat and harness in a real car. So having good force feedback through your wheel is a crucial element of sim racing that can either make or break your experience on a given game or sim. If you don't have good force feedback coming through your wheel, or you don't know how to react to it, it's going to be detrimental to your experience and your lap time. So here's some tips on how to deal with certain moments you're going to get through your wheel while sim racing. So the first one of these moments we're going to look into is understeer. In the simplest possible terms, understeer is when you turn in and the car goes straight simply because the front tyres have lost grip relative to the rear tyres. If you're making a turn, your wheel starts a rapid left to right vibration. It's likely you're experiencing the early stages of understeer and you need to get on top of that pretty urgently. It usually means you've carried a bit too much speed into the corner, or you're braking still whilst going into that corner. So on the next lap, try to remember to brake a bit sooner and harder. In the moment you want to back off the throttle while you're on it, apply gentle braking and avoid the temptation to increase steering, which would only make it worse. So the next major point I'm going to talk about is the opposite of understeer, and I think it's something we all enjoy from time to time, and that is oversteer. If during a corner your wheel starts pulling violently to the other side, it's more than likely going to be oversteer. Oversteer is effectively your car turning more than you want it to, simply because the opposite of understeer, your rears have lost grip relative to the fronts. The easiest way to handle this is to countersteer against the wheel feedback with an equal force, but be careful not to overcompensate or you might end up in a tank slapper. If you're feeling brave, you can try adding a bit of throttle during your oversteer to try and compensate and get the front end back in line. But if you get it wrong, you're more than likely going to spin and crash. If you're consistently having problems, then think about entering the turn a bit slower, braking earlier or accelerating more smoothly out of that corner. If that doesn't work, then take a look at your downforce, tyre pressures and suspension settings post-race. So what I found with, especially on the Assetto Corsa Competizione with Trueforce, is within a couple of laps, or straight away pretty much, that minor detail it gives me whilst driving around in terms of the FFB, it allows me to drive to the limit of the car but not over it, and that's kind of the key with managing oversteer and understeer. Trueforce really allowed me to do that from straight out of the box, whereas most wheels it takes me a little while to get used to it. Okay, so on to the next big moment you could get while driving, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, and it's called a tank slapper. Tank slapper, or fishtailing otherwise it's known as, is developed from overcompensating on oversteer, and trust me, it is definitely not a good thing. Your wheel will give you this bad news by moving left to right, generally quite quickly but lightly at the same time. The easy fix is to come off the throttle and let it fix itself, but if you watch the pros, you'll see they can beat it quicker by countersteering against the left to right wheel forces in rhythm. This is not easy, partly because it's a rapid movement and partly because it's usually such a light force that there's not much resistance to push against, and you can apply too much opposition very easily. Get it wrong and you'll likely spin and cost yourself a good result on track. So up next on the list is lockups. Now I can tell you for free, nobody likes lockups. So basically lockups are when you brake too hard and your wheels lock, and that is much less efficient than braking hard without locking up, and also it can ruin your tyres. If your car has anti-lock braking or ABS enabled, then lockups are much easier to avoid. You'll be able to feel a fast vibration when the system kicks in to stop you locking up, and if that vibration slows down to a shudder, then that's often a sign you've pushed past the limit of your ABS and locked up anyway. If you're driving without ABS, you'll skip straight to that slow shudder we talked about, and loads of smoke will occur from that. So basically, if you're struggling with locking up, brake earlier, brake a bit smoother, and have a look and see what ABS is telling you. Are you fully engaged with it or not? Maybe you're in the wrong ABS setting in general. So yeah, there's many things you can do to react to locking up. Now, Trueforce is something I feel that really helps with this specifically because you can feel the vibration before you lock up. You couldn't with previous Logitech wheels or other wheels I know if you're consistently on the limit but not locking up, because you know when you get that initial vibration you can come off the brake, reapply it quite smoothly. It's a big step forward from where it was. So this leads us on to our next point quite nicely, and we're going to look at flat spots. So obviously coming from lockups, in some games you'll actually be able to feel when lockups have created a flat spot on one or more of the 4 tyres. If you experience a vibration while going down a straight on a smooth bit of circuit and it gets worse as you get faster, that is usually a very good sign you've got uneven wear on one of the tyres out of the 4, and that is basically from a flat spot. So some games don't even have this at all as a feature, so you won't be able to feel any flat spots, but Assetto Corsa Competizione, in my opinion, one of the most realistic sims and games out there. You can definitely feel it. So if you turn the ABS off, lock up, on the next straight, you'll definitely feel that flat spot. Dealing with this is going to involve gentler and earlier braking to avoid another lockup. Flat spotted tyres are more prone to further lockups, so be extra careful, and considering pitting for new tyres sooner than planned if that's a thing in your race. The next thing we're going to look into is when your wheel starts to feel a bit lighter or there might be no feedback at all. If your steering suddenly starts feeling much lighter or the resistance cuts out altogether, then that generally means you've lost grip. As a general rule of thumb, think less weight, less grip. You're feeling that lightness because turning the front wheels of the car no longer affects the direction of where the car's going, which is obviously a bad thing. In certain places like the corkscrew at Laguna Seca for example, it's usually because your car's lost contact with the road because it's in mid-air effectively, but another way this can happen is when you take a little bit too much curb. Either way, hopefully it's obvious that you're basically a passenger until your car lands and you shouldn't be making any steering inputs until then. When you do land, you can expect a jolt to the left or right, so be prepared to correct that. One final thing you may notice through your wheel is when applying throttle out of a slow corner on the start, your wheel might violently pull left to right. This is due to torque steer and often happens when you dump the clutch and go full power right off the line, or any other time you stamp on the gas in a low gear, i.e. coming out of a slow corner. If you have any steering applied, then the wheel will move that way, but it can happen in a straight line too, with the direction often being specific to the design of the car. It's easily dealt with when you know how to deal with it. So basically, if you get it next time round, just apply the throttle a bit more smoothly and progressively, and you shouldn't get as much torque steer as you got before. No! So once again, Trueforce, it helps in pretty much every area of the driving of any car because it gives you more information, it gives you a lot more feedback to your hands, and in sim racing that's crucial. So if you get torque steer, you should have a greater feel for how to correct it, but you shouldn't get as much torque steer with this wheel because you have a greater idea of where the limit is, so you'll not push past it. So there you go, pay attention to what the car is telling you and you'll have a better idea of what not to do and what to do on track. If only it were that easy. My first impressions of the new wheel with the Trueforce software is a good one. It's a big step forward from Logitech, and if you're wanting to improve your pace on the sim as well as have a more realistic experience, then the G923 is not a bad way to go. And it's a good way of doing this without breaking the bank and going straight to a direct drive. It's a good stepping stone before you get there. The strength of the forces produced by the wheel are not too dissimilar to the G29 or G920. The detail, however, is on a different planet altogether. If you enjoyed this episode, then subscribe to the channel for more content like this. If you really enjoyed it, slap a like on the video as well. That is always much appreciated. But I've been James, and I'll see you all on the next one.